Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the EmeraldPlanet and EmeraldPlanet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us. Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you, as you heard before, on a week-to-week basis, looking around the globe for those best practices. And I have a gentleman sitting right beside me. This is Dr. Ming Yang. He is a member of Board of Directors of the International Fund for China's Environment, IFCE. And welcome, Dr. Yang.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about the mission and vision of your organization, IFCE. And then we're going to get in to start talking about smog in China, which people all know about, but you're going to eliminate it so we don't have it anymore.
Thank you. The mission of the IFCE is to protect both Chinese environment and the global environment. Mm-hmm. For example, we would like to work to have a better environment worldwide, including climate change mitigation, global warming reduction, and biodiversity protection, land degradation neutrality, and waste and chemicals management. This is our mission.
Okay.
Our vision for the next 10 years is to become a champion worldwide in linking the US and China working together to address this kind of global environmental issue. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's really fantastic. And looking at the whole issue of smog, this is something that makes the world headlines constantly. But at the same time, what is heavy smog? Let's define that term, and then we're going to just see some pictures of what this actually looks like.
Definition of a heavy smog. There's a lot of definition. I think from my personal point of view, from my experience in China, whenever I perceive like a smog, I cannot see about 100 meters far away, I think that's a heavy smog already. In addition, whenever I expose this kind of smog, I feel very painful in my eyes. I also feel very difficult to breathe. So this is my perceive about the heavy smokes.
Yeah, and I think that's true of most Chinese. I've been to China a number of times, and the whole thing is that if you really can't see across the street, you really have heavy smog. But looking at it, what actually creates such smog as we're seeing in these photographs, where you can barely see the skyline?
There are quite a number of factors that cause this kind of smogs. For example, the primary factor is fossil fuel consumption. The combustion engine, combustion boilers, using fossil fuels like coal, oil, emit a lot of pollutants. Not only greenhouse gases like CO2, but also other pollutants like tiny dust and some.
That's what's called particulate matter.
Yeah.
Right.
And also some pollutants one cannot see actually. For example, carbon monoxide and the nitrogen dioxide, this kind of thing we cannot see, but that's very harmful for not only for the climate, but also for health. Yeah.
Now, looking at these cities, I mean, this really is, we're going to use this term heavy smog because you can barely see the skylines, even see the lights, you know, in many of these areas. So how does that actually impact the humans that live in this area as well as their pets? Because more and more Chinese are having pets, animals, you know, in their apartments. So it must be affecting them as well.
Of course, from my point of view, there are quite a number of ways this smog impact people. Firstly, psychologically, that's a huge impact on human beings. For example, personally, I was offered for a job to work in China, and very good, attractive salary, very good other conditions, working conditions, but I refused to take that job in Beijing because of the smog. I'm afraid that kind of air pollution will kill me earlier than I should be. So I refused that because this kind of psychological impact. Secondly, this smog really impacted people. I mean, create more people, poor healthy people to visit the hospitals because of this kind of lungs issues, for example, lung cancers. And this is a very big impact for China.
Now, looking at the whole thing as far as the heavy smog, the impact that you're just talking about on human beings, how does that affect as far as the youth that are in schools, K-12, kindergarten through high school, going into universities? How does that impact them as far as thinking about their future of staying in China or maybe even going abroad? Because now the Chinese, it's more open. They have world-class education. So really they could be almost anywhere on the planet. So how is this smog affecting the psychology of the youth as far as what they're going to do in the future?
Of course, as I mentioned, psychologically this impact will have a long-term impact for these people. For example, in the school where I was in there, I visited my friends' kids. They know this kind of situation. Whenever the smog comes, they will wear masks. But actually, these masks do not help. I mean, they know this, they know this situation, and they have in their mind that they will start it very hard and try to get education opportunities overseas, like in the US. So this is the kind of impact already. They tried very hard to get rid of that kind of a situation in China.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so you have that. So about the workers that are in these factories, we have some smokestacks here. I mean, it's incredible the amount of pollution that's going up these stacks and out into the air. So how does that affect them on a day-to-day basis? And how does that impact them as far as their satisfaction even with their work?
I think that kind of air pollution improvement has a great impact already in China, and it dramatically improved air quality, reduced the number of days of smog in China. For example, in Beijing, I was in Beijing last October. I saw the air quality was very much better than before, than a few years ago. So that is, I think, is a benefit from this kind of air pollution reduction by this kind of technologies in factories. So yeah.
Well, but the whole thing about the workers that are working around in these areas, of course, most of them are actually living very near these factories and all that. So what is the interaction of the workers with their spouses, with their families, and it's from the standpoint of we're making a base for the future, is that you're seeing it today, and they're saying we can do better. I mean, this is the theme all across China.
Yes.
So what we're showing the worst right now, and we're going to show how you're actually working to help clean that up. But how does that really mobilizing people to say we can do better, and as Chinese, we want to live better?
Yes. Physically, personally, I worked in Tangshan City to work with some people in there. Basically, it's kind of a steel and iron production companies and factories, which were highly polluted. And I worked with the workers, as you mentioned. They were basically they were got used to that kind of situation already. So but we educated them, but they were happy. So they try to protect themselves. For example, get them educate their home family members. You know, in heavy smoke days, they shut up their windows. You know, this is kind of situation happened already. So basically, they know this situation. They get it, but they of course they try the best to improve. Yeah, right. I think that things are improving. Thank you.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it, I mean, this is Tiananmen Square, very beautiful area. This is kind of almost the anchor of China and all that, but you still see this smog everywhere. So as far as the general population, and this goes really back to IFCE, how is this actually helping you to promote the idea that we really can address smog, that we can eliminate smog across China, and that we need to work together as Chinese in order to do that?
Thank you. As I mentioned, in Beijing, the air quality has been dramatically improved. But this does not mean for other cities, like small cities or medium-sized cities, because Beijing had a very good policy to relocate this kind of pollutant factories, you know, outside of Beijing area.
They actually did that at the Olympics.
They did already.
And that was a tremendous change in Beijing and that whole area around Beijing.
But for other cities, like cities where I was born, this is another situation. People still use a lot of coal or oil or for this kind of smog production, you know. So this is the situation. So we need to still work hard and harder even for these cities to work with the government and the local community people to install the air pollution reduction facility or technologies there to reduce the pollutants.
We have a photograph here of a young lady that's walking across the street, smog all around. And so how is she thinking about this? Or what can you project as far as what she's saying is for my future, I want something different. For my children's future, I want something different, correct?
I believe her future, after maybe 10 or 20 years, particularly for her children or younger generation, the situation will be much better. We believe this kind of air quality, air pollution will be improved. I mean, air pollution will be reduced. For example, the Chinese government has put a high priority in air quality improvement, in GHG emission reductions, and they have particularly several steps. For example,
well, we were running out of time. So what do you see as far as IFCE improving the air quality, and you need to do that in about 15 seconds?
I think we will continue engage in the U.S. Government and U.S. people, technology and stakeholders to work in China to transfer their technologies and their knowledge in China to help the Chinese people work together with the U.S. government and U.S. people and the technology transfer.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Dr. Young, thank you very much as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And Dr. Yang, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Glad to have you here. The short question is, why China? Why China as far as the world impact? Why China as far as smog and how it's impacting the rest of the world? But why is it so important that we solve the issue of smog in China? So let's look at a couple of these slides and then we'll talk about the impact. Why China? Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing right now.
Thank you. Why China? Because China is the most popular country with 14.3 billion people, roughly about 18% of the world population. Secondly, China is the second largest country in terms of GDP production, just after the US. And the Chinese people last year, I believe, produced about 15% of the world GDP. More importantly, the Chinese people emitted about 30% of the worldwide greenhouse gas emissions in 2019.
Yeah, now those are tremendous statistics. So, you have a major world power, has high gross domestic product, but yet at the same time, it's emitting the highest percentage as far as greenhouse gases.
And also, mercury, sulfur dioxide, China contributed about 25% of the worldwide emissions in each of these kind of pollutants.
Yeah, and mercury is a real issue.
Yeah.
We've been involved in green mining processes in the United States and abroad, and mercury can absolutely just destroy a local area. But we're going to look at some of the best practices, and this is something that you've been able to go all over China and find those different best practices, both in the rural areas and the urban areas. So I'm going to leave this image up because this is about the rural area, but why look at the rural areas of China when you have hundreds of millions of people in urban areas and very concentrated, some of the top largest megacities on the planet are in China? Why are you balancing rural with the urban?
Thank you. China is on the high process of urbanization. More and more rural people are moving to urban areas. So far, China has about 573 million rural population. And
that's an incredible number out of 1.4 billion people.
Yeah, so like 150% of this U.S. population.
Right, correct.
So these people are rushing to the urban area. So far, each of the country people consumes only 1 ton of coal equivalent, but the urban resident consumes about 3.5 tons of this kind of.
So roughly three and a half times of what the rural area is actually using as far as coal is concerned.
Yeah, but if these people are moving towards the urban area with the former urban people, that means that the pollution, energy consumption will triple. So that will dramatically increase this kind of pollution in terms of carbon emissions and also PM 2.5. So in order to address this issue, we have to focus on these people to make sure they will have a green path while they are moving towards urban areas.
Or actually try to entice them to stay in the rural areas to give them a higher income levels.
Exactly.
Better access to amenities, not just education, healthcare, but the movies, music, all these things that entertainment that people are coming in the 21st century to enjoy. But we have images of 3 different best practices on the screen. Tell us a little bit about this mix of the major power plant, the sunshine, and the biomass.
Yes, please. In China, we have done a lot of work to put this technology, U.S. technology, in China to generate power from biomass energy. Basically, the kind of waste, solid waste for power generation. Also, we encourage local residents in rural area to use their locally available renewable energy to generate biogas for power generation and for fuel for cooking as well. So basically, we hope in China by 2050, the rural people will use zero carbon-based energy, so that this rural area will become zero carbon economy in China.
Now, looking at this power plant, I know this is something the IFCE has really been working on as far as not only reducing the amount of coal or fossil fuels that's going actually through these power plants, but also the emissions. We saw those stacks earlier. And so you're trying to actually scrub out a lot of the carbon emissions, but at the same time to take off the heat and the energy from these plants and use it either in the factory itself or in the cities. Tell us about the impact of this factory we're looking at right here.
Thank you. For this kind of factories, of course, we put this kind of clean coal technology, like a stacks in the factory. That will use a little bit of amount of energy in there. But in the meantime, we use advanced technology to capture the waste gas for power generation at the same time. So together, actually, the energy efficiency has been improved already, not reduced efficiency. So that's why with this kind of collaboration between US and China, using this clean coal technology will benefit the factories that will really enhance the capacity of the enterprises in terms of efficiency and the revenue increase as well.
That's fantastic. Also, too, is something that may be amazing to people. China now is the leader as far as wind energy, and this is going up all over China. And so tell us a little bit about wind power and how that's going in now to the mix of renewable energy as you broaden the base for renewable energy. And we're going to show some other examples of the renewable energy just in a few minutes.
Sure. Wind power production and wind power capacity installation, now China is the #1 worldwide in terms of accumulated capacity installation and additional capacity installation last year. So now worldwide, if we divided the wind power capacity into 3 parts, the China has 1 part. The US and Japan has the 2nd part. And the 3rd part is owned by all other countries together. So you can see the capacity of power generation in China, #1. So, and in terms of really electricity generation, I think China needs to learn from the US because the generation factor, capacity factor is much less than in the US.
Yeah. Now going to the solar, this is something that China now is excelling on. Of course, you know, they have many companies that are producing solar panels, exporting around the globe. But more and more, China is actually using its own solar energy to offset the use of coal and other fossil fuels that are more polluting. So what is the factor as far as solar is concerned in China?
Factors for solar, I believe the Chinese government and the enterprises, the researchers, they have worked very hard over the past 15 or 20 years. And the technology in China is advancing dramatically over this period. For example, I met with a gentleman from the NDRC. He told me now the Chinese government and the people use their own created technology in solar. Solar in terms of materials and the technology development.
So they're doing the advances, the inventions,
research,
the improvements
R&D.
right in China itself.
China.
Right.
And they use their own materials for silicon process, and, you know, and every 5 years in China, over the past 15, 20 years, every 5 years, the cost for silicon production or solar PV production reduced by 50%.
That's absolutely
every 5 years.
That's fantastic. Now, looking at hydro, this is something people know about the Three Gorges Dam and all that, but you have dams all over China. So this really is a renewable energy source, correct?
Yes. In terms of hydro, I think that the Chinese people have made use of most of the resources of hydro already. Like you mentioned, the Three Gorges hydro power plant, and in addition, there are a large number of medium-sized or small-sized hydro power plants already. And this has, using hydropower has significantly contributed to China in rural electrification and the clean energy production as well. So this is a fantastic. If I have time, I can make you an example. I don't know.
Well, let's move on through these because this is really, it's just as far as now we're talking about leading the world as far as the PV race, they're calling it. But the whole thing about that is really important that China really does have this inventiveness and is starting to use it for its own people.
Of course, the Chinese technologies have been exported to overseas in Africa, for example, in India. I met with a gentleman in India. He told me they use the Chinese made solar PV in India. With that technology, they can generate electricity at the cost of $0.3 per kilowatt hour electricity, which is very, very low.
That's very low,
yeah,
absolutely.
very low.
Yeah, but anyway, and then also the wind power, we were talking about this earlier, and how China now is #1 in the world as far as producing the wind power. And you can see that how it's gradually gaining over time. So looking at the solar, the wind, of course the hydro, how do you see that as shaping the future of China as far as moving away from the fossil fuels and using more renewables?
Thank you. In the future, I believe China will combine this kind of different kind of renewable energy together, technologies together. For example, we will electrify, or we call electrify the rural people in the second wave. That means now Chinese rural people has been electrified already, but they use the fossil fuels.
Right.
Now we're talking about the second wave of rural electrification using renewable energy technologies with a target of 0 carbon emission for rural people.
And that's what we're showing right here.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is that actually they're capturing that, using it, also using syngas, which is much less polluting, less particulate matter. So what do you see for the advances, and we'll say the rural and urban areas, over the next 5 or 10, 15 years? And we got to be quick, we got about 15 seconds.
So we will use this kind of technology, biogas generation technology, to generate the power, generate the heat for the rural people, combined with the solar, wind, because this way the whole rural people can be electrified by 0 carbon technologies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. Thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet. Hello, and thank you for being with us on the EmeraldPlanet TV. As you know, we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States. And we're talking about the nation of China and the impact it's having on the world environment, as well as on its own people and everything that happens within China itself. And I have a gentleman sitting right beside me. This is Dr. Peng He. He is the president of the International Fund for China's Environment, IFCE. He's been on Emerald Planet before, and welcome back.
Thank you.
It's always good to have you, and I know you've been spending a lot of time in China over these last few years, but actually you're the real pioneer, and I keep saying that to you and to other people I introduce you to, as far as the nonprofits, the NGOs in China looking at the environment. So looking at yourself, what compelled you to take this giant step in China almost 20 years ago to found IFCE and say, we're going to do something different for the environment in China?
Mainly is passionate to the environment and passionate to China. I was originally from China, but got my graduate study in the U.S. and learned the history of environmental improvement in the U.S. So I want to transfer this experience to China to help improve the life quality of the people in China.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. And the thing that I've been most impressed with the years that I've known you, when we were introduced by the ambassador from the Chinese embassy, I want to throw that in because this has turned out to be a very good relationship. But you really focused on education as one of the several different pillars of IFCE. Tell us about education and why you think that's so important, but to do it in China.
Yeah, that's also from experience of the U.S. and the environmental movement actually is from grassroots here in these countries, but China is a little bit different. So environmental awareness is quite low when we started 20 or 23 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we think awareness is very important. It's to make the policy more smooth and more fully implemented. So we think awareness, capacity, public capacity is one of the key elements of environmental protection.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at the people in these seminars, I've been very impressed by the numbers of people involved. You can tell they're very attentive to the instructions, and I've been in some of these seminars because I've traveled with you in China, and it's amazing. I mean, they're almost just like human sponges, just trying to get every bit of information possible. And then they really go out and they try to implement it almost as soon as possible. How do you identify the people that come into your seminars?
Mainly we have focus group. We identified the group like students from colleges, from high schools. Then we identified the women's group. We have partnered with the China Women's Federation, the Shanxi Women's group. So it's family-based, and children and women, youth is target. That's a targeting group.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at going on site, this is one of the things I found very interesting. And when I go back to China, I want to do more of this, is on-site evaluation tours that you set up at some of the power plants, even at the cement plants, the syngas production facility that we visited. This is very useful and very helpful to understand the changes that are happening in China. How did you come on this idea of having these tours? You do them quite frequently.
Yeah, I think I want to bridge. IFCE means it's a bridge for the U.S. and China environmental exchanges. I want to bring more U.S. people to see the changes, the efforts, and the challenges the people in China are facing in environmental and energy issues. So I want to bring as many as possible delegation to there, let them see and use chopsticks, whatever to feel and the changes, and so how then they can figure out what's the way they can help. They can play a role in the largest market in China, environmental market in the worldwide.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, also too, one of the things that I found very interesting is you were actually working with the employees in these various factories, plants. Even on the farms, we went to a pig farm and converting the manure into renewable energy. So when you're talking to the presidents and the leaders of these companies, what is their feedback as far as having this education on site to their own employees?
I think it's important to training the factory owners and leaders to make it more effective to implement the standards, policies, regulations. So we'll always invite the leaders to come to U.S., see how U.S. do. Mm-hmm. So once they learn the process and the procedures and available technologies, they can apply it to their own problems. So one of the key segments is factory leaders and industrial leaders. We invite them many times from different industries, different factories, and different regions. So they come to us very frequently.
Yeah, because the one thing is quite interesting is that you're actually doing this across the whole of China. It's not just in Beijing or Shanghai, a few of the major cities. We were visiting villages of, maybe 50, 100 families, which you think would not even exist in China, but there's, thousands of these out there. But looking at the dialogue within the companies, how is IFCE helping these leaders of these organizations communicate with the workers and saying we need to do things differently in China because we are one of the leaders in the world now economically. Now we need to be also one of the world's leaders environmentally?
We do through showing the best practice in the US and also showing best practice in China in some other regions like Shanghai, Guangdong area. And the most serious problem is Western China, North Western China, some other regions little far away from the coast. Mm-hmm. So they, if we can see the best practice and experience in the coast area and in the US, so they can easily understand how can they solve the problems. Meanwhile, they can also keep their productions, keep the economy going on, continue profit, but they improve the living, but also protect the ecological system.
Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about it is, you're improving the profits of these, private corporations. You're helping state-owned organizations in many different ways as far as when they're selling, but also you're helping them to reduce their cost, which is really that hidden benefit that many people don't even think about. Lowering your cost, and so that you can bring more profit and bring more earnings to the workers, correct?
Yeah, one of the key experience in U.S. For environmental protection is lowest the cost to achieve the best, maximum environmental benefits. That's what we learned from U.S. So we want to apply this to China, not just close factories and restrict your productions, but when you want to maintain your local productions, then meanwhile reduce your pollutants and use recycling, heating recovery to compensate your environmental investment. So that one you won't have a big burden for the environmental standards to meet those higher standards. So that's one of the key philosophy in our group. We want to promote those technologies, how can recycling waste, recycling all this industrial leftover and minimize the impact to the environment. Also generate more benefits and profit through this process.
Yeah, one of the things too impressive is that you work with all levels of governments. So many people think you just deal with the Central Committee or you deal with Beijing, the central government, but really there's thousands of local governments all over China. They're very active. They're the ones that are interacting directly with the public. So the public are onto them as far as, we have to reduce smog, because that's one of the main things we're talking about.
Right.
So you do a lot of work with local governments.
Yeah, we have three main functions. IFCE, one is policy advising, advising in general strategical of the environmental and the climate changes to the central government. And for technologies, we're working with more companies, also local government, dealing with directly environmental issues. And third one is also capacity and education. Last couple of years, we're working in Xuzhou to abating the smog issues, very serious smog issues, smog problems. We identified white problem is after the wet desulfurization process. Come out white smoke is one of the main reasons to why the government has spent so much time and so much funding to control still the effects not as people expected. So because this the side effects of the wet and the moistures. So we want to take this moisture out of this smoke white from problem. So in Xuzhou, we did a demo project in Xuzhou last year, and we dealt with 10 big power plants. And you're addressing the plume that's actually coming out of the smokestacks, right? To make that dry, or even just totally remove it. Totally remove the moisture from emission. So the moisture is cause the main serious smog breakout. That's the main reason we identified. But still, a lot of people in China not recognize it yet. So we want to do the demo. So Ministry of Science, recommended us to go to city and do a demo and find our best technologies. So we're still working on that. Still not completely solution yet, but that's the first step to address this issue. Now, going to the seminars, you're doing it with the local and central government. In other words, local governments up to the central government. You're working with the business owners, private organizations. You've been working with the NGOs and also with the local government officials. So is there a common thread, just like the seminar you're presenting right here, is there a common thread that you're running through all of this? Local government, central government, NGOs, private companies, so everybody's getting the same message, how we need to progress in change in China? Not yet. Not in same page. The central government they have policies. Then the local government, sometimes they obey it. Sometimes they choose whatever best fit for them. So but the public don't know technology enough. So they just want to better quality of the environment, better quality of air and water. So it's kind of struggling. So NGO play a kind of a watchdog like us. Want to make sure the policy be implemented. Also technology available, best technology available to the industries. So these three group need to be more working more closely. But right now, still a little bit gap between each other. Got it. Last question, 15 seconds. So you got to be quick. What do you see for this
pace accelerating as far as bringing these three main groups together in the next 5, 10, or 15 years? They got to be quick.
I think there is a big potential for that because the problem is real, challenge is real. Both government, NGO, enterprise want to have solutions. So once have a solution, once need a solution, then have a mind, then we can make things happen.
That's fantastic. This is Dr. Peng He, the President, International Fund for China's Environment. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us as we're looking how to bring the best practices to the people of China, eliminate smog, and have better water and land quality as we create the Emerald Planet. Thank you for being with us as we're looking at the country of China and looking at smog abatement, because smog has become really an issue on every Chinese person's mind, regardless of age, because it surrounds them day in and day out, no matter where they live in China, whether it's urban areas or rural areas. And so the gentleman sitting right beside me, this is Dr. Peng He, who is the president of the International Fund for China's Environment, IFCE. And he's been working on environment in China now for over 20 years, over 2 decades. That's really incredible. But he's really looking at this as far as how do we address the issue of smog, and out of that we can address many other issues as far as the environment to balance the air, water, and land quality in China. And I think that's really a very smart strategy to use, because you're using something everybody acknowledges is real, and then all the other things can fold more easily under that. So why did you select smog? Besides, it was obvious and everywhere.
Right. Smog was busted in 2013 in China, shocked the whole world. Not only China, people in China, so shocked the whole world. Suddenly, smog came from nowhere and all over China. So we had a small forum in DC and talk about this reason, what cause, analyze the cause, what was the problems. So that time, 2014, we found out it's a process of air pollution abatement technologies cause some of the issue, because sulfur dioxide is one of the key air pollution component pollutants. Once you did this one, most use desulfurization process. You put a lot of water in there. So once the water gets in immediately to the air, then the moisture increase, so the smog busts out. So we found these problems. Then we sent a policy recommendation to Chinese government, and but they didn't pay much attention at that time.
Now, looking at IFCE, you started modestly. You've grown now to virtually everyone, even in a country as big as China, knows about IFCE and the work that you're doing. How over these years were you able to gain the trust of the central government, the provincial governments, and the local governments that really allows them to welcome you to come in, not just you go, they welcome you to come in and expand over China? What's been that process? And then we'll get into smog and how you've been addressing that.
I think first of all, most of our founders are originally from China. We have natural connections, so we have cultural understanding with not much limited language barrier. And second one is we have been not only promoting technology exchanges, not only just focus on education and capacity building, but also provide policy advising to the central government. So that's very important. Also, use this platform in DC to promote activities, what happened in China. So we kind of help China to disseminate information to the worldwide. So that's why the Chinese government also welcome us to work in China.
Yeah. When we were talking about creating the Emerald Planet TV, and I went to your embassy, in Washington, D.C., and I said, we're really interested in the best practices. We're not talking about all the problems out there, but the best practices, solutions. Right. And we would like China to be part of that. Well, one, he was astonished that, I was saying there's best practices in China at that time. We're in our second decade now. But then he said, you have to go see Dr. He if you want to learn about this and do
Right.
it. So the embassy, many of the agencies were really talking about and welcoming you as far as being this bridge, if you will, between the United States and China back to the United States. So looking at introducing these technologies, what did you do to start setting the stage or the platform for you to start bringing these technologies into China, which most people think about that market's very closed and it's very difficult to do, but in some ways they're very welcoming as far as new technologies. How did you set that stage?
We work with partners in China, Industrial Association, Renewable Energy Industrial Association. Those then we're also working with those non-profit and also industrial group in the U.S. So identify what's the needed in China. So we'll ask what's the needed, what's the problems. So like 10 years ago, we brought largest U.S. solar delegation to China. That's 17 CEO from U.S. And we partner with the Solar Industry Association for U.S. Then bring them back to China, bring them to China. Also wind technology as well. And that's 10 to 11 years ago. So identify the needs. That's beginning get started of China's renewable energies. So brought the best technology to there. So they develop a partnership. And later on, we also brought soil remediation technology group to China. They also welcomed this field. We will bring more smart treatment technology to China. So we identify problems, then looking for technologies, find the best fit. So we do a kind of preliminary selections, searching. Then so that's once you can solve the problems, everybody will welcome you.
Now, looking at these various seminars and the sharing of information across China, you are bringing international experts come in, but also you're using many Chinese have been educated abroad and now bringing them back into China. So how are the local Chinese that have always been there? They went, through, kindergarten to high school and university, many of them advanced degrees, but within China, how have they been, like this photograph we have here, how have they been welcoming these international experts, whether they're US, Western European, other Asian nations, or Chinese that are living abroad? How have they been welcoming them back into China to help to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, we paid special attention to the expert, Chinese expert in the U.S. because they don't have language barriers. So they have learned a lot of work in factories, experienced. So we introduced them back to the factories, industries in China. So they first of all they understand the problem. It'll be easier. Also, they learn the advanced technologies, so they can link the problems to the solutions. So a little bit easier. So for more than half of our delegation are formed for Chinese Americans. So I think that's also a little bit more effective in some way. That's why.
So they can sit together, talk together, and and they look alike.
Right.
And that really does help. But looking at the sage that I have the photograph here, this is yourself making one of your presentations. It's really been amazing the enthusiasm, because you've been at this almost 23 years now. And so to think of the countless thousands of hours. I've traveled with you several times. I don't think you ever sleep. You do eat ever so often.
I told the people a joke as I working 12 hours for US, 12 hours for China. I don't have time to rest.
No time for yourself. But looking at being, this sage, going back to, the sages of old China, how do you think that your message has been accepted, the fact that you've been doing it so enthusiastically, and you've really, shouldn't say sold, but you've educated the Chinese that there must be a middle way. It's kind of like the Middle Kingdom concept. There must be a middle way between what the West is doing, what China has been doing, and where we want to go in the future. How has this sage been able to share that message?
Like 20 years ago, when Radio America interviewed me, they have a direct dialogue with people in China. They asked 10 people what's the importance of the environment. 8 people say, I don't care about it. Only 2 people say environmental concept is important. But nowadays, after 10 years of actions and pushing from inside and outside, probably more than 90 people knows about issues.
I was going to say I've met hundreds of Chinese. I would say, 10 out of 10 are concerned about the environment.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
Right. So that's the changes. We see the changes.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. We're going to quickly go through this. These are some documents that you were sharing with me the other day about the importance and how you were able to go through that process, get the proper stamps or proper authorities, which really kind of smooth your way into being able to go to all levels of government and all the people because you have the stamp from the central government.
Right. That's why we have maintained good relation with the central government. I mean, like Ministry for Science, and
I have that document up here. You're proud of that document.
Developing, reforming commissions. Some of the ministers are on advisory board. So some of are invited experts. So we working along with them and make sure they understand our intention and our advantages. So that's why government still will trust us. Even we criticize them openly and point out problems, but they say, well, that's something they needed.
Yeah. Now looking at this, and we want to go through these quickly, and I wanted to end up on these best practices, and we are about running out of time. But as far as having the hot spots around China, this is something where you start highlighting, and I'm just going to mention this because I know this, highlighting these issues, and the hotspots were virtually over the whole country. But then you started introducing the technology, say, look, we can remediate this and make China better. Let's just kind of go through this. Tell us what we're seeing here, and we'll just go through these slides, and then we'll end up with the final question.
Yeah, mainly the Smog efforts has not been achieved as people expected. Smog still, very heavy in China. Is the side effects of the treatment technologies, like say desulfurization, denaturalization. Those first of all emitted too much of moisture, so water.
Right.
Then when you do nitrogen remove, you use a lot of ammonia. Ammonia, once it gets into air, you can catalyze the particular formation.
Right.
So you generate more PM 2.5. So you have you take one element down, then you have some other issue came out. So that's the side effects. So people have not paid attention to that yet. I think the government say, people say, so we have put this index so low, SO2 very low, NOx is very low, dust is best in the world, but the smog still came out. We now we want them to pay attention to the side effects, not only just got a beautiful index, but also the real effects in air, what's happening in
it's just like this one here is where you have the before and after, as far as, just simply just siphoning off the heat and using it as a byproduct in the production process, or even heating in the housing units is something that's very important. But syngas, why is this becoming so important both in rural and urban areas? And we got to go out on this one. We're about out of time.
I think can reduce the use of coal, because the coal is still mostly protein fossil fuel. If you could more gas, synchronized gas generated from coal, you can reduce overall pollutions. That's one of the strategies the Chinese government is trying to take.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Dr. Ha. Thank you for being with us as we look at China, removing smog, and bringing the best practices from around the world as we create the Emerald Planet.